Hi everyone, I'm Peyton from Rackets Runners. Brooks is releasing 4 new shoes in their Glycerin lineup. And so today we're gonna dive into those and take a look and see which one of the Glycerins might be a good fit for you. Before we dive in, please check us out at racketsandrunners.ca or remember to drop by and see us in store. In the last Glycerin series, Brooks introduced a new DNA-tuned cushioning technology. What this means is that the shoes had larger cushioning cells in the back of the shoe and denser, smaller cushioning shoes in the fronts of the shoe. This allowed you to have a really plush landing in the back, and then when you toe off the front into your next step, it would give you a more responsive toe off than a traditional high cushioned runner that has the same density of foam all throughout it. First, we're gonna start off with the foundation of the Glycerin line. This is the new Brooks Glycerin 23. This is what I would call a high cushioned runner, and it's also neutral. What this means is that this is a shoe that's built more for a longer distance run compared to Brooks's Ghost 17s. How this compares to the previous Glycerin 22 specs wise is that they dropped the Glycerin from a 10mm drop to an 8mm heel drop in this version of the shoe, in the Glycerin 23. What this means is that your heel is going to be 8mm higher than your toes are. The stack height of this shoe is also higher because it is a more plush shoe. It's 38 in the heel of the shoe and 30mm in the front of the shoe. Another difference in the shoe is since they did add a little bit more cushioning to the shoe and they redid the upper, this version of the Glycerin is a tiny bit heavier. Another update that I personally really liked about this shoe compared to the Glycerin 22 is that they redid the upper of the shoe to make it more plush and comfortable, and they also redid the fitting of it. So I found while wearing this shoe that it fit more comfortably around my midfoot. It felt more secure, but I still had room in my forefoot where I could actually kind of spread and wiggle my toes. I also really appreciate that they have done a good job about adding these finger loops, so it's a little bit easier to slip your shoes on and off. Asics does the same thing, and I really appreciate when designers add that to the shoes. Overall, they didn't really change the cushioning formula in the shoe. It still uses their DNA-tuned technology with more plush landings in the back and more responsive toe-offs in the front, but they did reconfigure it and add more stack height to make it a little bit more plush. Feel-wise, compared to the Glycerin 22s, I actually really like the Glycerin 23s quite a bit better than the Glycerin 22s. I was a pretty big fan of the Glycerin 22s when I first put them on, but for me, when I found after I'd run about 10 kilometers, my feet would hurt a little bit after each run because it felt like the shoe was a little bit too flexible for how I like my shoes for longer distances. I did like the Glycerin 21. That was my favorite and my go-to shoe that I would use all the time until I kind of switched to the Nova Blast 5 by Asics. I found that the Glycerin 23 feels a lot more kind of what the Glycerin 21 was representative of, and so I liked the shoe because while running in it, even though they didn't really change the cushioning system itself, that extra stack height stiffened the shoe up for me and felt more what I like in a running shoe. So again, a little bit stiffer while getting a little bit more of that responsive toe off and being plush and protective for longer distances. So now that we've covered kind of the base of the Glycerin line, let's take a look at her sister, the Glycerin 23 GTS. This is essentially the same shoe as the Glycerin 23, but while the Glycerin 23 is a neutral shoe for people who don't pronate or need a little bit of extra support, Brooks designed the Glycerin 23 GTS to be their support shoe at a higher stack height. So GTS, you might have heard of it with the Brooks Adrenaline GTS. Essentially, this is just Brooks's support technology for their shoes. So in addition to having some arch support added onto the inside here, they use this guardrail system along the outer heel of the shoe to really give you almost cup your heel into the shoe and provide more stability in addition to more support around the arch. The shoe is the same as the Glycerin in stack height and heel drop. It is a tiny bit heavier just because there is a little bit of extra added material for that support system, but it's like 0.2 ounces tops. Like it's not that big of a difference. So the biggest difference you're gonna notice between these two shoes is how the ride of the shoe feels. Running in this shoe, I think it's very feasible for neutral runners to be able to wear this as well because a lot of the support comes from that heel cup. So for me personally, I didn't really notice it while running until like my feet get a little bit more tired. And it's kind of nice to have a little bit more support in the back once, you know, you're going those longer distances, your gait's getting a little bit more sloppy. I do have to say, I feel like with the way that they did the heel cushioning in the shoe and the way it firmed up, this one does feel pretty stable to me. This shoe is more designed for people who need arch support and don't necessarily want to use orthotics or inserts in their shoes. This is what that's built for. And it's really cool that Brooks has this type of shoe in a high stack height, high cushion shoe, because most brands don't make a supportive shoe in a higher stack height. I just think the Glycerin GTS and the two shoes we're going to talk about next as well is just really showing how they want to provide products for niche categories. Moving on to another niche that Brooks has filled, we're going to take a look at the newest Glycerin Max. This is the Glycerin Max 2. I got a pair of the original Glycerin Maxes and I was a huge fan of them. They were, again, one of the first more running geared maximalist shoes. What I mean by that is when people think maximalist shoes, a lot of people think like the Hoka Bondi, the Brooks Ghost Max, and the New Balance More, shoes like that, who have really high stack heights in both the front and the back of the shoe and tend to have a lower heel drop. A lot of those shoes are made with a more plush cushioning system, so they're meant to be protective. So they're great for longer distances because they help absorb a lot of the impact, but where they kind of lack is in the responsiveness. They're a lot harder to pick up speed in. Where Brooks tried to fill that gap is the Glycerin Max. So they took the DNA Tune technology that they used in the Glycerin 22 and put it into the Glycerin Max, and now it is also in the Glycerin Max 2. Again, it has bigger cushioning cells in the back of the shoe and smaller and more densely packed cushioning cells in the front of the shoe. What this does is it gives you all of the cushioning of a maximalist shoe when you land in the back, but lets you toe off with a little bit more speed. When you run, it doesn't feel like you're losing energy in the shoe. It feels like you're landing and then trampolining off into your next step. They didn't update the Glycerin Max 2 too much to the Glycerin Max 1. It pretty much has the same specs as the original Glycerin Max. It's got 45 millimeters of stack height in the back of the shoe and 39 millimeters of stack height in the front of the shoe with a 6 millimeter heel drop. They used the same DNA tuned technology, so again, denser in the front, more cushy in the back. And the biggest update is that they redid the upper of the shoe. One of the complaints about the previous Glycerin Max is that it had a super roomy toe box. Like, that's usually a good thing. It was bigger. And so some people who had like not necessarily narrow feet, but like slightly narrow normal feet, found it to be a little too much wiggle room and they couldn't get a good cinch down in the midfoot. They fixed that in this shoe, kind of like they did with all of the uppers of this batch of Glycerins. So it hugs you really well in the midfoot, but you still have room to wiggle your toes and have room to spread them in the forefoot of the shoe. The other difference that I noted first when I saw them out of the box is that the aesthetic difference compared to the Glycerin Max 1, I would say the Glycerin Max 1 was definitely looked like kind of futuristic, whereas this Glycerin lineup, which it was especially noticeable in the Glycerin Max, has kind of this Sagrada Familia-esque kind of patterning in the shoes, which is interesting. It definitely looks different than other shoes. Feel-wise, the Glycerin Max 2, even though technically the specs haven't changed from the Glycerin 1, the way that they shaped the cushioning or where they started the rocker, it does feel a little different while running compared to the Glycerin 1. I would say the Glycerin 2 feels a little bit more stiff, and it felt like it was a little bit more on the protective side and kind of lost a little bit of the responsiveness compared to the Glycerin 1. It's still a lot more responsive than pretty much all of the maximalist running shoes, so keep that in mind. But it does feel a little bit more on that like super premium plush feeling shoe that is a little bit stiffer with that rocker, so you do have a little bit more responsive toe off. Overall, it's a great shoe, super cushiony, just maybe slightly less poppy. Okay, so last but not least, I want to introduce you to the newest member of the Glycerin family, the brand new Glycerin Flex. I was personally a little skeptical when I first heard about this shoe coming out, but when I put it on, I think this is actually like one of my favorite shoes out of the lineup. The idea behind this shoe is that Brooks wanted to take the things that people liked about the maximalist shoes and combine them with what people like about more minimalist style shoes. So what do people like about maximalist shoes? They like the plushness, they like the cushioning. What do people who like minimalist shoes like? They like how your foot can flex with each step naturally. A lot of running shoes nowadays are high stack height, even if they're not maximalist, and quite stiff. So if you take a look at the GTS, like twists a little bit, but it's pretty firm, pretty stiff. Where you have the Glycerin Flex here, it is much more flexible, but still provides you stability and support where you need this. What they did is that they took the DNA tuned technology. So again, larger cells in the back of the shoe, smaller and denser in the front of the shoe. So when you land, it's nice and cushioned. When you toe off, you get all of the responsiveness to help launch you forward. And they combined that with a flexible sole. How they did that is they put this groove into the midfoot of the shoe to help bend with your foot as it moves. And to give you more stability, they kept this stiffer podular part of the midsole here. So where you need that support on the inside of the shoe, even when you're rolling, it's still nice and stiff here so your foot doesn't roll off to the side and so you don't pronate. Again, this is pretty cool because I'm usually not the biggest fan of more flexible shoes. I like them to be pretty stiff, but the fact that this was so cushioned in the back and they had this saving grace of this extra midsole support here, this shoe was really comfortable. I put it on and I was surprised when I put it on how much I liked it because I was expecting it, I'm not quite sure what I was expecting, but it felt really stable, especially compared to some other high cushioned running shoes. And I hadn't really experienced a flexible high cushioned shoe before that I felt super stable in, which is why I tend to go for more firm shoes. This is a super great option for people who want that higher cushioning, but want a little bit more of a natural flex to their foot. I could see this being a really good option for like a high rocks shoe if people wanted to do that, because it gives you that stability and cushioning in the back for the kilometer runs. So I think this would be a really good kind of mixed sport shoe to use. It's not a cross trainer, like don't go play pickleball in this, but if you're doing some type of CrossFit or fitness sport, or if you just want a running shoe that's really comfortable and a little bit more flexible, this is a phenomenal option. Specs wise, this is still pretty similar to the other shoes, but it's just a lot lighter because they can cut out so much of the midsole of the shoe. The Glycerin Flex has a stack height in the heel of 36 millimeters and in the forefoot of 30 millimeters, so it has a 6 millimeter drop. Another really interesting spec, which I kind of foreshadowed before, is that the shoe is a decent amount lighter than the normal Glycerin. The sample weight for the Glycerin Flex is 8 ounces, while the weight for the normal Glycerin is 9.6 ounces. Yeah, so overall, I think this is a great do-it-all shoe. I think it would be great for high rocks. I think it's great for running. I think it's great as an everyday shoe. I think it looks really nice. Just a long story short about who these shoes are for. This one is for my neutral runners who like higher cushioning without dipping into the maximalist territory. The Glycerin GTS is for my runners who need arch support but want that higher cushioned shoe. The Glycerin Max 2 is for my runners who like a maximalist shoe but want some more responsiveness and pop while they're running so they can go a little bit faster and keep up momentum. And the Glycerin Flex is a do-it-all shoe. You can run in it, you can go to the gym. I think this would be good high rock shoe. It's not quite in the area of cross trainer, but to each their own. What works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. These are just my thought about these shoes, and I'm very impressed with Brooks's Glycerin lineup, and I'm super excited to add these shoes to my rotation. If you want to check these shoes out, come take a look at racketsrunners.ca or come visit us in store.